Hello, I'm Detective Rex, and you're listening to the REXCAST. Today's case is one of those that makes even my tail stop wagging. A story of betrayal, family secrets, and the sweetest revenge you'll ever hear. Ready? Then smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from right now. Now, let's meet our guest today. Shirley, the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much, Rex. People always ask me how I survived what my daughter-in-law put me through. How I went from being the woman who raised a beautiful son to becoming the villain in my own family's story. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you about revenge. Sometimes it serves itself on a silver platter. And all you have to do is wait for the right moment to lift the lid. What happened to me would break most mothers. What I did about it, well, that's going to shock you even more. My name is Shirley, I'm 63 years old, and this is the story of how my son's wedding became the day I discovered who my real family was. But before I tell you what my daughter-in-law Kayla did to me, before I reveal the secret that changed everything, I need you to understand something. The woman I was before this happened? She doesn't exist anymore, because when someone tries to erase you from the most important day of your child's life, when they look you in the eye and tell you you're too late for a wedding that happened yesterday, something inside you either breaks forever or transforms into something they never saw coming. I chose transformation, and by the end of this story you'll understand why Kayla's cruel game became the best thing that ever happened to me. But first, let me paint you a picture of who I thought my daughter-in-law was. I met Kayla 3 years ago when my son Dean brought her home for Thanksgiving. Beautiful girl, charming smile, said all the right things. Mrs. Harrison, your turkey is incredible. Dean talks about your cooking all the time. I can see where he gets his warm heart from. Classic manipulation, but I didn't see it then. I was so starved for acceptance, so desperate to be the mother-in-law who got it right, that I ate up every compliment like a woman who hadn't been fed in years. She even brought me flowers, expensive ones, and spent the entire evening asking about Dean's childhood stories. Tell me about when he was little, she'd say with those perfect doe eyes. I want to know everything about the woman who raised such an amazing man. I felt seen. I felt valued. For the first time since my husband died, I felt like I was part of a real family again. What I didn't realize was that she was studying me, learning my weaknesses, mapping out exactly how to use my love for my son against me. I saw a young woman who made my boy happy, and that was enough for me. Dean had always been my pride and joy. After his father died when he was 12, it was just him and me against the world. I worked 2 jobs to put him through college, sacrificed my social life, my dating life, everything. Dean was my purpose. So when he fell in love, I was genuinely happy for him. I wanted to welcome Kayla into our small but tight family. The red flags started small. Family dinners where she'd steer conversations away from me. Holidays where she'd conveniently forget to invite me until the last minute. Comments about how some mothers need to learn when to step back. But Dean was blinded by love. And I was trying so hard to be the cool mother-in-law that I ignored every instinct screaming that this woman saw me as competition. The engagement came 18 months ago. Dean called me crying with happiness. Mom, I'm going to marry her. I'm going to marry Kayla. We talked for 2 hours about ring sizes, venue ideas, guest lists. He promised me I'd be right there beside him through every step of planning. He promised me I'd help choose flowers, taste cakes, pick music. Mom, you're going to love being involved in this. We want you front and center for everything. Those were his exact words. Front and center. The first wedding planning meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning. I took the day off work, bought a notebook specifically for wedding ideas, even researched local vendors online, so I could contribute meaningfully. I showed up at Dean's apartment at exactly 10 a.m. with fresh coffee and pastries from his favorite bakery. Dean answered the door looking confused. Mom, what are you doing here? My heart started racing. The wedding planning meeting? We discussed this? Kayla appeared behind him in a silk robe, looking like she'd just woken up. Oh, Shirley, we moved that to yesterday. Didn't Dean tell you? The look in her eyes wasn't apologetic. It was triumphant. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with oversight. I was dealing with strategy. But if you think that was bad, you haven't heard anything yet. Because what Kayla did at the actual wedding, it's the kind of betrayal that changes a person forever. And here's what she didn't know. Every cruel move she made was teaching me exactly who she really was. Information I would desperately need later. Hit that like button if you're ready for this to get intense. And make sure you're subscribed, because this story is about to take a turn that will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. The exclusion became systematic after that first meeting. Wedding venue visits happened without me. Dress shopping was just the girls. Kayla, her mother, her sister, her college roommate. Never me. When I asked Dean about it, he'd get defensive. Mom, you're being sensitive. Kayla's just excited and wants to handle things her way. But here's what really broke my heart. I'd raised this boy to be kind, to be inclusive, to value family above everything. Watching him choose her feelings over mine felt like watching 25 years of motherhood crumble. The bridal shower invitation came 3 days before the event. 3 days, for a party I should have been co-hosting. When I called Kayla to ask if there was anything I could bring, she said, "Oh, just yourself. We have everything handled." When I arrived at the venue, I understood why. Her mother had been introduced as Dean's future mother-in-law. I was just Dean's mom. The difference might sound subtle, but in that room it was everything. I watched this woman accept congratulations and gifts meant for both families while I sat in the back row like a guest who'd received a pity invitation. But the real slap in the face came during the toast. Kayla's mother stood up with champagne and said, "I'm so grateful that my daughter found a man who comes from such a loving, close-knit family. I know Dean's mother has done a wonderful job raising him, and now it's time for our family to take care of him. Take care of him." As if I was retiring from being his mother. As if my job was finished and I could be politely dismissed. The women in that room applauded. These strangers were applauding my replacement. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes straight. When I came back, the conversation had moved on. Nobody noticed I'd been gone. That night, Dean called to thank me for coming. "Wasn't that amazing, Mom? Kayla's family is so organized. They really know how to throw a party." I wanted to scream. Instead I said, "It was lovely, sweetheart," because what else could I say? That his fiancé was systematically erasing me? That I felt like I was losing my son to people who saw me as obsolete? He wouldn't have believed me. He was too in love to see the manipulation happening right in front of him. The wedding date was set for October 15th, a small ceremony, immediate family only. Dean assured me I'd be sitting in the front row, that I'd have a special role in the ceremony, that it was going to be intimate and meaningful. "Mom, you're going to love it. It's exactly what you and I always talked about when I was growing up." For weeks I helped with small tasks, addressing invitations, researching photographers, calling florists for price comparisons. I thought maybe I'd been overthinking the exclusion. Maybe Kayla was just stressed, and things would get better as we got closer to the big day. 2 weeks before the wedding, Dean called me sounding strange, distant. "Mom, there's been a change of plans." My stomach dropped. "What kind of change?" "We're having a destination wedding instead. Just Kayla's immediate family and mine. Super small. You'll love it." The destination was a resort in Mexico. The new date was October 10th, 5 days earlier than originally planned. The cost per person was $3,000, and I had exactly 8 days to arrange time off work, get a passport rushed, and pay for everything. "Dean, honey, I don't have a passport. I can't get one in 8 days. Long pause. "Well, maybe you could meet us when we get back. We could do a reception here." The way he said it, so casual, so dismissive, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a change of plans. This was the plan. Make it impossible for me to attend my own son's wedding, then offer some consolation prize afterward to ease the guilt. But I wasn't going to make it that easy for them. "Of course, sweetheart. You know I'll do whatever it takes to be there for your special day." I hung up and immediately called the passport agency. Emergency processing. Extra fees. Expedited everything. I cleaned out my savings account, took unpaid time off work, and booked the most expensive last-minute flight of my life. Nobody was going to say Shirley Harrison didn't fight to be at her son's wedding. I was going to be there if it killed me. I didn't tell Dean I was coming. If they wanted to play games, I could play too. I landed in Cancun on October 9th, took a taxi to the resort, and checked into a room I couldn't afford. That night, I called Dean. "Surprise, sweetheart. I made it work. I'm here at the resort." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Mom, you're here?" "I'm here." I couldn't miss my boy's wedding. "What time is the ceremony tomorrow?" Another long pause. "Mom, the wedding was today." My blood turned to ice. What? We moved it up one more day. We're already married. You're too late. And that's when I heard her voice in the background. Kayla, laughing. Not trying to hide it. Not even pretending to be sorry. Just laughing. Like my devastation was the punchline to a joke she'd been setting up for months. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a perfect foundation to build something new. And what I was about to build would change all of our lives forever. If you want to know how this story ends, you'd better hit that like button right now. And make sure you're subscribed. Because the revenge I'm about to tell you about, it's the kind that makes you believe in justice again. I stood in that overpriced hotel room, holding the phone, listening to my son tell me I'd missed the most important day of his life, while his new wife laughed in the background. The sound of her laughter echoed in my ears like nails on a chalkboard. It wasn't just cruel, it was victorious. The laugh of someone who had just won a war. I didn't even know we were fighting. I could hear music in the background, people celebrating, glasses clinking. The reception was still happening. My son's wedding reception was happening right below me, and I was standing alone in a hotel room that cost me 3 months of grocery money, wearing the dress I'd bought specifically to be the mother of the groom. 25 years of sacrifice, love and devotion, and this was my reward. But instead of crying, instead of begging, instead of calling Dean back to plead for forgiveness for the crime of loving him too much, something clicked into place, something cold and calculating that I didn't know existed inside me. I hung up, not another word, just silence. And then I did something that would change everything. I got dressed, went down to the hotel bar, and ordered the most expensive whiskey they had. While I was sitting there, trying to process what had just happened, a woman approached me, well-dressed, probably mid-50s, sitting alone like me. "You look like someone who's having the worst day of her life," she said. "Want to talk about it?" Her name was Patricia. She was a private investigator from Dallas, at the resort for a work conference that had been canceled at the last minute. 30 years in the business, she told me, specializing in matrimonial cases and financial fraud. She'd seen it all: cheating spouses, hidden assets, stolen identities, family members who destroyed each other for money and power. "Honey," she said, stirring her martini with a practiced hand, "in my line of work you learn to spot certain types of people from across a room. Your daughter-in-law? She's got that look. The look of someone who's done this before." After I told her my story, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Not a happy smile, a predatory smile. People who are capable of this level of cruelty, this level of calculated manipulation, always have skeletons. The question isn't whether they exist. The question is whether you want me to find them, and whether you're prepared for what we might discover. At that moment, staring at the wedding photos Dean was posting on social media, seeing my replacement family celebrating while I sat alone in a hotel bar, I made a decision that would have shocked the old Shirley. I wanted to find every skeleton in Kayla's closet, and I wanted to rattle them until they danced. Patricia didn't charge me her usual rate. She said my case reminded her of her own mother-in-law's story. Consider it professional courtesy between women who've been underestimated. What she found in 3 weeks of investigation changed everything I thought I knew about my son's new wife. Kayla wasn't just manipulative. She was a professional criminal with a resume that would make a career con artist jealous. This wasn't her first time isolating a husband from his family. She'd been engaged twice before, possibly 3 times if Patricia's suspicions about a case in Oregon were correct. Both confirmed times, the same pattern: charm the family initially with gifts and compliments, then systematically exclude them with scheduling conflicts and emotional manipulation, then move the man away from his support system and drain his finances. The first engagement ended when the guy's sister hired a private investigator and found out Kayla was married to someone else the entire time. The marriage certificate was from Las Vegas, filed under the name Catherine Walsh, to a man who was still paying her alimony, and had no idea she was engaged to someone else. The second engagement fell apart when her fiancé discovered she'd been stealing money from his elderly grandmother's checking account. Small amounts at first, 50 here, 100 there, but over 6 months it totaled nearly $8,000. Money an old woman on Social Security couldn't afford to lose. But here's the really interesting part. Kayla had outstanding warrants in 2 states for credit card fraud and identity theft. Small amounts, nothing that would make national news, but enough to cause serious problems if the right authorities found out where she was currently living. She'd been using different variations of her name to avoid detection. Catherine Walsh in Arizona, Kay Walters in Nevada, Kayla Walsh here in Texas. Same social security number, same date of birth, same fingerprints, same pattern of behavior. Patricia presented me with a folder 2 inches thick. Bank records showing mysterious withdrawals from joint accounts, credit applications using Dean's information without his knowledge, even evidence that she'd been flirting with her personal trainer and keeping their text conversations on a separate phone. I stared at those documents for hours. This woman had been systematically building a financial house of cards using my son as collateral, and he had no idea. But here's what really got to me. The timeline showed she'd started applying for credit cards in Dean's name, the same week she moved in with him, before they were even engaged. This wasn't love that got complicated. This was a targeted operation from day one. The question now was what to do with this information. I could have called Dean immediately, thrown all the evidence at him, demanded he listen to me. But I'd learned something important about Kayla. She was good at making people think problems were someone else's fault. If I came at them directly, she'd find a way to make me look like the jealous mother-in-law who was so desperate to destroy their happiness that I'd fabricated evidence. I needed a different strategy. I needed her to destroy herself. So I started sending anonymous tips to the right authorities. Nothing traceable to me, just a concerned citizen who happened to notice some irregularities in credit applications. Someone who happened to recognize a face from an old warrant photo. Someone who happened to have questions about tax filings that didn't quite add up. While I was setting that groundwork, I did something else. I started being the perfect mother-in-law. I sent thank you cards for wedding photos. I mailed them thoughtful gifts for no reason. I called Dean regularly just to chat, never mentioning feeling excluded, never bringing up the wedding disaster. I became everything Kayla had tried to prove I wasn't supportive, giving drama-free. And it was driving her absolutely crazy. Because here's what Kayla didn't understand about manipulation. It only works when your victim reacts the way you expect them to. When I stopped being hurt, when I stopped complaining, when I started acting genuinely happy for them, it broke her entire script. She'd built her relationship with Dean on the foundation of protecting him from his difficult mother. But if I wasn't being difficult, what was she protecting him from? The cracks started showing immediately. Dean began mentioning conversations where Kayla seemed frustrated with me for being fake. She'd make comments about how I was probably planning something, how my sudden change in attitude was suspicious. Dean, bless his heart, started defending me. Mom's just being supportive. Isn't this what you wanted? The beautiful thing about watching someone self-destruct is that you don't have to do anything except stay out of their way. And Kayla was about to implode in spectacular fashion. But the real fireworks were still coming. Because while I was playing the long game with kindness and patience, those anonymous tips were working their way through the system. And Kayla's past was about to catch up with her in ways she never saw coming. Keep that like button smashed and stay subscribed. Because what happens next is going to restore your faith in the universe having a sense of humor. The first crack in Kayla's perfect life came on a Tuesday morning in January. Dean called me, and for the first time since the wedding, he sounded uncertain. Mom, can I ask you something? Do you think it's normal for someone to have 3 different driver's licenses? Apparently Kayla had asked him to grab her wallet from her car, and he'd found licenses with different names. When he asked about it, she'd gotten angry and accused him of snooping. She said they were old ones from before we got married. But Mom, one of them was issued last month. I could hear the confusion in his voice. My boy was finally starting to see cracks in his perfect wife's story. But I knew I had to be careful. One wrong word and she'd convince him this was all my manipulation. That does sound strange, sweetheart. Have you asked her about it again? Every time I bring it up, she changes the subject or starts a fight about something else. Last night she told me I was becoming paranoid like you. Like me. Even when caught in lies, she was still trying to make me the problem. But this time Dean didn't agree with her. This time he said, Mom, you've never been paranoid. Protective maybe, but not paranoid. That phone call told me everything I needed to know. The foundation was starting to crumble. 2 weeks later, Dean called again. The credit card companies had started calling. Applications he'd never made, accounts he'd never opened, debt he'd never incurred. Mom, someone's been using my information to open credit cards. Kayla thinks maybe your identity theft happened to me too. The way she'd immediately pointed suspicion at me was almost impressive. But Dean wasn't buying it anymore. The thing is, all these applications came from our home address, and they started right around the time Kayla moved in. I let him talk it through. I didn't suggest anything, didn't point fingers, just listened while my brilliant son put the pieces together himself. Mom, do you think, is it possible that someone I live with could be doing this? Oh honey, that would be terrible if that were true. Have you talked to Kayla about it? I tried. She got really angry and said I was accusing her of being a criminal. But Mom, who else has access to my personal information? The next call came at 2 in the morning. Dean was crying. Mom, I confronted her. I found credit card statements hidden in her car, $50,000 of debt in my name. When I showed them to her, she told me it was all your fault. My fault? She said you'd been poisoning me against her since day one, that you'd probably planted the evidence to break us up, that you'd do anything to get your son back, even destroy his marriage. I let him cry for a few minutes before I said anything. Then very quietly I asked, Dean, do you believe that about me? Long pause. No, Mom, I don't. I think I've been an idiot. 3 months after the wedding that I was too late for, Dean filed for divorce. But not before one final confrontation that I'll never forget as long as I live. Dean had arranged to meet Kayla at a coffee shop to discuss the divorce terms. He didn't know I was there, sitting 3 tables away with a newspaper and dark sunglasses like some kind of spy movie character. I needed to see her reaction with my own eyes. When Kayla realized Dean was serious about leaving her, when she understood that all her manipulation had finally backfired, she dropped every pretense of being the sweet, loving wife. The mask came off completely. She screamed at him in that coffee shop, called him an ungrateful mama's boy, said he'd never amount to anything without her guidance. She blamed me for everything, claimed I'd brainwashed him, said I was a pathetic old woman who couldn't let go of her son. Other customers were staring. The barista looked ready to call security. And through it all, Dean just sat there calmly, watching the woman he'd married show him exactly who she really was. When she finally ran out of breath, he said quietly, "You know what, Kayla? I think my mother would have handled this conversation with a lot more class." That was the moment I knew my son was truly back. The real satisfaction came when Kayla was arrested 2 weeks later. Those anonymous tips had finally worked their way through the system. Outstanding warrants, credit card fraud, identity theft. As they put her in handcuffs, she screamed that it was all my fault, that I'd set her up, that I was a vindictive old woman who couldn't let her son be happy. The police report noted her claims but found no evidence of third-party manipulation. Everything they discovered came from her own paper trail, her own choices, her own crimes. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Yeah. Dean kept the house, his credit score eventually recovered, and Kayla got 18 months in minimum security prison. But the real victory wasn't her jail time, or the divorce, or even getting my son back. The real victory was what Dean said to me the day the divorce was final. "Mom, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. You never tried to turn me against her. You never badmouthed her, even after everything she did to you. Even after she tried to destroy our relationship, you just waited for me to figure it out myself." He paused, and I could see tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry I let her convince me you were the problem. I'm sorry I chose her over you. I'm sorry I let her exclude you from my wedding. And I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that you've never, not once in my entire life, been anything but completely devoted to my happiness." We planned a new celebration, not a wedding obviously, but a recommitment ceremony. A commitment to rebuilding our relationship, to never letting anyone come between us again, to honoring the bond we'd always had. It was small, intimate, perfect. Everything the wedding should have been. Just me, Dean, and the family members who actually mattered. No manipulation, no exclusion, no games, just love. As I stood there watching my son promise to never again let anyone make him choose between his family and his romantic relationships, I realized something profound had happened. I hadn't just gotten my son back. I discovered who I really was underneath 25 years of putting everyone else's needs before my own. The woman who flew to Mexico on 8 days' notice. The woman who hired a private investigator. The woman who had the patience to let justice work itself out naturally. That woman was stronger, smarter, and more resourceful than I'd ever known. Kayla thought she was erasing me from Dean's life. Instead, she gave me the greatest gift imaginable. She forced me to find out what I was really capable of when pushed to my limit. And what I was capable of was more powerful than her manipulation, more patient than her schemes, and more enduring than her temporary victory. Today, Dean and I are closer than we've ever been. He checks in with me daily, includes me in every major decision, and has promised that any future romantic partners will be thoroughly vetted not just by him but by both of us together. He's dating someone new now, a wonderful woman named Sarah, who insisted on taking me to lunch the second week they were together. I want to know the woman who raised the man I'm falling in love with. She said, that's how I knew she was different. That's how I knew this one understood what family really means. The lesson here isn't about revenge, although I won't lie and say Kayla's downfall wasn't satisfying. The lesson is about patience, about trusting that the truth always comes out eventually, and about never underestimating what a mother will do to protect her child, even when that protection means stepping back and letting them learn the hard lessons themselves. Kayla thought she could write me out of my son's story. What she actually did was give me the opportunity to write myself back in as the hero.
What an incredible journey, Shirley. Your story proves that sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is patience and faith in the truth. To everyone listening, if this story moved you, if it made you believe in the power of a mother's love and the victory of justice over manipulation, then I need you to do 3 things right now. First, smash that like button with everything you've got. Second, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell, because stories like this are exactly why this podcast exists. And third, share this episode with at least 5 people who need to hear that good always triumphs over evil, even when it takes longer than we'd like. Drop a comment telling me what part of Shirley's story hit you the hardest, and remember, every single one of you has more strength inside you than you realize. Sometimes it just takes the right circumstances to bring it out. I'm Detective Rex. Until the next case on our podcast, and stay tuned for 2 more incredible stories coming up next that you absolutely cannot miss.